In tonight's episode, we're going to be listening to several terrifying tales with humanoid beings, skinwalkers, and wendigos. Let us begin. So, I've been kind of wanting to share my story now and experiences for a bit, but what my sister told me a few days ago made me want to share this possible encounter. I'm Native American, and so is my father and siblings. My mom has a very little, but there is some. We aren't involved with any tribes, but I do enjoy looking, reading, and trying to be active in the native culture. There are also plenty of tribes in the state that I live in. Now, a few weeks ago, I was asking my father about the tribes around here, asking if there was a possibility that skinwalkers could be up here. He kind of avoided the question, but did tell me that a tribe up north was notorious for murders, both by members and unexplained ones. I tried seeing if I could pull any more answers out of him, but I was not. Now, time for the actual encounters. Both my sister and I have experienced them the most, but my brother has also had some unexplained scratching and whispering at night. It was rare, but it did happen. The encounters began at the beginning of summer in 2017. Now, me and my sister share a room. She's always been afraid of the dark, so being the nice big brother I am, have shared a room with her. Anyway, it was around maybe 11 p.m. when me and my sister had heard a weird sound. It was like a bird call, but definitely not normal. It sounded like someone with strep throat trying to mimic a crow. Both me and my sister kind of just looked up from our phones and gave each other a weird look. We live in an apartment complex that's located on the edge of a small town. The town is a druggie town, so for like the first hour, we thought it was just some druggie outside tripping out, but it lasted about 3 hours, ending finally around 2 in the morning. My sister had fallen asleep and everything was quiet, but then I heard the big dogs down the road start barking and going crazy. I thought it was just weird timing or they saw an animal, but looking back, I think it might have been a skinwalker. A few weeks go by and the same sound again starts at around 10 or 11 p.m. and would usually end around 1 or 2 in the morning. At first, me and my sister didn't really pay attention to it and eventually thought it was actually a weird bird. But one night, I had slept over at my friend's house, which was a trailer on the edge of town right near mine. Me and my friend were just about to fall asleep on the couches when I heard that same sound. I sat straight up and looked at my friend. "You heard that, right?" I'd asked her, thinking it was imaginary. "Yeah, it sounded like a bird. Why?" She told me back, probably thinking I was crazy. "Oh, it's nothing. I just hear that a lot." I replied back. If I told her, she probably would have believed me, but I just tried to make it seem like it was nothing. That night, the sound had lasted until I fell asleep. Now, fast forward another week, and we're hearing the same sounds at night. My sister now was beginning to get paranoid. I was too, but I told her it was nothing. It's just a dumb bird. At this point in the summer, I was listening to lots of skinwalker stories and began connecting their similarities to what was happening with me. Then one night, me and my sister were just chilling in our beds with our open window when the noises started up again. This time, they sounded more ragged and sick. They stopped pretty quickly after they started. Me and my sister just shrugged at each other and went back to our phones, when suddenly, right next to our window, we hear the most blood-curdling scream. It wasn't human. It sounded like a baby scream crossed with a dog yelping. With the sound ringing in our ears, me and my sister both jumped and she screamed, hiding under her covers. I honestly hid under my covers with my heart racing. We waited what seemed like hours until my sister, Whisper, yelled at me, asking if it was safe. I had to put my big boy pants on and uncover to close the window. I did so rather quickly, but when I got to the window, nothing was there. My sister wanted to tell our parents, but I knew they'd never believe us. The next day, though, I had asked if they had heard anything, which they said they had not. I brought this stuff up to 3 of my friends one night while having a sleepover. At first, most of them took it as a joke, but Then I explained how I felt I was being followed and having this sense of dread 24/7. They then seemed to believe me, and I told them that I thought it had followed me to their very houses. And what freaked us all out was that night, my friend's dogs began barking and acting and growling like crazy. Afterwards, one of my friends had remarked, "Why did we become friends with a Native American?" It made us laugh and calmed the atmosphere the rest of the night. Back home, my sister had told me that the noises stopped while I was gone, which pretty much had confirmed to me that it was indeed following me. Constantly now, I was feeling dread and could not sleep at night. That scream ringing in my ears and the sound outside, increasing by each night, sounding more and more sickly. Like I said, this had been lasting all summer, so eventually we just kind of got used to it. Sometimes it sounded like there was more than one, but as long as it didn't get close, we didn't really care. At my friend's house, it was still the same, paranoid of seeing it. Even walking with my dogs at night freaked me out because their gaze would fixate on something in the tree line, just out of my sight. They wouldn't bark or anything, just stare, then start sprinting towards home. I'd follow, gripping the leash so they wouldn't get away. It really freaked me out. One night, I caught a glimpse of it through the curtain crack. The noise had got closer, but me and my sister were prepared to hear another of those terrible screams. But no. I looked out the window as the wind blew in, and I saw what I believe was the Skinwalker. It looked so sickly and thin, its eyes sunken and its face looked like it was scowling. I just stared at it until the curtain moved back, and then it was gone. The dread had filled even more. After that, we began hearing less and less. Toward the end of summer, we had heard it again, and I decided to record the sound. It sounds weirder on the recording, but it's there. I wish there was a way to show it on here, but everything had died down, until recently. I still have that constant feeling of dread, and I've become more paranoid, but I know what I've been experiencing/hearing is real. Last month, me and my siblings and dad saw a white deer. I know that means good luck, but just the other day, after my father picked me up from work, he told me that on the way, he had seen a white wolf sitting on the side of the road, just watching cars. I don't know if this is significant, but it's something to note. Also, my sister has been experiencing stuff while in her room. Just last week, she came running out of the room saying she had heard scratching at the window. It's all just super freaky and weird. I'm already kind of a paranoid guy, but this is all too weird just to be coincidences. I just hope it stops. I would love to get a good night of sleep, after all. Story 2. When I was younger, between 3 and 11, I lived in a trailer with my stepdad, my mother, and my younger brother. We lived in a very small town in northern Minnesota. The town was less than 100 people. The center of town was only about a mile away, and down the street from that was about 6 to 7 houses. I lived in the middle one. On the left of our trailer was the front door, our playground, a strip of border trees, and a crop field, corn to be specific. On the right of our trailer was the back door. Its door handle was broken, and we did not have the money to fix it, which then led into a fenced-in area for our dogs, then another border strip of trees, a daycare on the other side of that, and less than a half-mile down the road was a cemetery. To the front of our house was the road and a cornfield, and to the back was our house and our backyard, which was bordered by tall, thick weeds, an empty field with a trail that led from our house to the woods, which was a little less than half a mile from our house. At the time, we were very poor, which is why we could not fix a lot of things in our house, even if we needed them, like the door in the back. The layout of the trailer went like this. Towards the road and the front end was my room. The furthest from anyone, a small bathroom and hallway. The front door, living room, and kitchen/dining room, then a long half hallway towards the back. On the left side of the hallway, more towards the back than the kitchen, was my brother's room. Right across from that was the back door. Then, in the very back was my parents' bedroom. My stepdad was pretty abusive to me, so in the middle of the night, I would run away, which was more just sneaking out and hiding under our front porch for an hour or two, then sneaking back into my room. At one point, when I had done it, My stepdad got so mad, he broke our porch light. I was only about 7 or 8 at the time. One night was particularly bad, so I left at like midnight or 1 a.m., went under the porch. I was there for maybe 30 minutes, then I tried to go back inside. Little did I know, my stepdad was still pissed off and locked me out. At this point, I was 9, so I freaked out, started crying at the door trying to get it open. All the lights were off inside, so it was almost pitch black outside, aside from the streetlight. I was still crying when I heard a sound coming from the woods. It sounded like crying, so I stopped, thinking I was echoing or something. But it never stopped. The crying didn't sound like an animal or anything. It sounded like someone had recorded a person crying. It really sounded like me. I panicked, fear tearing through me. I tried the door harder, but I still could not get it open. I'll just run to my mom's window, I thought. As I was about to, the crying sounded closer than it had before. It was a continuous crying, but coming towards me. My face began to heat up, and tears began to line my vision. Back door, the words popped into my head. The doorknob is broken, I can get in. I paused and listened to the crying. It still sounded closer to the woods than me. So I took my chance. I ran around the front of the house and paused before I reached the right side. The crying had stopped. This was my chance. It went away, or so I thought. I booked it to the fence. The latch was stuck. I tried to push it up, and just as it started to lift and slide up, there was a whisper from the tall border weeds, no more than 15 feet away from where I was facing. "Come here. Come here. Come here." The words became stretched out and honestly horrifying. It sounded like a very old, slow, distorted sound from a handheld recorder. I pushed the fence gate open and slammed the latch back down, ran up our decaying steps, all 2 of them, and flung open the door. I slammed it shut and pushed a heavy box in front of it. I booked it down the hallway, through the living room, and right into my room. I closed my window quietly and left the blanket fall over it, so nothing could see in. I turned off the lights, turned on a movie very softly, and crawled into the top bunk and waited out the night. I could hear walking around the trailer, and I could hear muffled whispers, "Hey, come here," and then crying, "Go away, go away." I wanted to scream at it, but I didn't want it to find me. When morning finally came, I told my mother about my stepdad locking me out, but not about what happened. "Who the hell do you think you are? She's 9. And my mother had screamed at him. He apologized and said he thought I was inside, but I knew he was lying, because I did this every night, and he always saw me. My mom didn't know, however. I never snuck out after that. Now, the next night, around 10 p.m., I was sitting in my bed and I could hear coyotes out towards the cemetery. I fell asleep for a while and got up later that night, around the same time as the previous night, and went to get water from the kitchen. My dad was waiting for me. "Come outside. I want to talk to you." In my situation, I was mortified. I was about to be outside with the thing and my horrid stepdad. We went out to the front porch. I was waiting for the degrading to start, but it never did. We stood out there for about 10 minutes in silence, watching the stars in the sky. Off in the distance, we could hear what sounded like coyotes from before. Only this time, it was from the field behind our house. They sounded weird. "That's coyotes. They're hunting something," my stepdad said. I looked up at him and shook my head. "It doesn't sound like coyotes. It sounds weird." He gave me a knowing look and then sat down on the bench next to where I stood. I looked out towards the field. The coyotes sounded even closer. I looked back at my stepdad and he seemed like he was hesitant to tell me something. I looked back at the field again. The noises were so close this time, I swear I could hear hooves in the weeds. Goosebumps grew on my skin when I noticed them. A pair of red eyes staring back at me from the exact same spot in the weeds where I heard it the other night. I stepped back and gasped. My stepdad looked and then put a firm hand on my shoulder, pushing me towards the front door. He got me back inside and then locked the door and the chain above it. He brought me to the kitchen and said, "Don't ever leave the house at night. It's dangerous out there." What was in the weeds? What animal has red eyes? and I started crying quietly and told him about the previous night. He pulled me in and hugged me. "You're not old enough to know right now. Just promise me you won't ever go out there at night again." So I just cried and nodded. He brought me into my brother's room and set up a sleeping bag on the floor next to my brother's bed and our dogs. They were on alert and growling at the blanketed window. That's when he put a movie on for us, even though my brother was sleeping, and went back to the living room and stayed there the rest of the night. All throughout the night, I could hear the cries of coyotes and the same form of growling from my dogs or the coyotes. My stepdad never talked about that night and never told me what it was, so I can't know for sure what I saw or heard, but I think it was a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. I listened, and I never went out at night again after that. Story 3. You've probably read hundreds of stories about Wendigos or Skinwalkers, but I hope you enjoy it. Also, I apologize in advance if I'm all over the place. I'm not much of a writer. This story isn't mine but my good friend's, and I've never seen her this shaken while telling a story. She is the most genuine and open person I know, so when she told me this story, I believed every word. I don't want to use her real name, so I'll call her Jen. Jen and I like to talk about anything and everything when we reconnect, but one thing we love to talk about is spirits and the supernatural. I'm Native American, so stories about skinwalkers or similar supernatural beings aren't alien to me. I even have my own stories. Jen likes to go to open fields on the nights of full moons. We've done it together a few times, and it's an amazing, surreal experience. But one night, she went with her other friend that we'll call Jessica. She and Jessica went to an open field and began walking through it. But this was different than the other nights. Jen felt off. She thought she was hearing twigs snapping behind them. She has bipolar disorder, so she thought it was just in her head. But she was overwhelmed with this feeling that she could not explain. She felt on the edge, like she was being watched. They continued to walk and stop in the middle of the field, and Jen starts looking around. And if you've ever been in the middle of the woods with a full moon out, you know just how it could light up everything. She sees something and she bolts, not saying a word. She left Jessica behind, but Jessica was quick to react and follow behind her. They got to the car, Jen locks the doors and she rips out of there. Jen was hysterical, crying and yelling, "Did you see that?" over and over to Jessica. Jessica didn't see it, but she felt the same way Jen was, and she had heard what she had heard. Jen saw something that shook her to the core. As she was looking around, she heard a branch snap and looked over. About 9 feet off the ground, peeking around a tree, she sees a white, pale face. I'll explain it to you how she explained it to me. She said it was like looking into a husk of a humanoid. No emotion, no life. The eyes were non-existent, and only had a few strands of what looked like hair. She couldn't see if it had a mouth, but she said where the mouth was supposed to be was just a red stain, which she believed to be blood. As she told me this story, she trembled and cried. I've never seen her that way. I trust her with my whole being, so I trust every word she said. I had to comfort her and calm her down after she told me this. She still sees that face in her dreams some nights. I hope she recovers from this experience, but when you experience something like this, it'll stick with you forever. I personally have a lot of stories to tell, and a lot of friends have opened up to me about theirs, so there will be more to come. Story 4. So, to start, I know this might sound like some creepypasta, but like my first story, everything I'm going to be telling you is true, no matter how fictitious it may sound, and may even be longer than my first. I have videos to go with if anybody wants proof, so here we go. As mentioned before, I live on some property in Wilson, Oklahoma. Wilson and some of the surrounding towns are known to have sort of a hallowed grounds existence to them, and we all know you can't have the good without the bad. Now, I'm not sure if everybody here fully believes in the paranormal or that there are things out there we haven't fully discovered or understand, but I do, and I have, long before I moved to where I live now. I have had paranormal things happen my whole life, and it's not like when I moved here, everything just started going haywire. Don't get me wrong, when I moved here, I had heard stories and knew about Molly and cults, had heard of cryptids, skinwalkers, etc., but other than seeing shadows or the occasional flying deodorant can, I never really came across anything that scared me. That was until about 2 years after I moved here. I just left my shop on the property and was walking my dog over to my house. Now, I don't know what gave me this intuition, but I've always kind of had a sixth sense, so to speak. Not like I feel like I'm being watched, but more like something's just not right about this. I put my dog in my house because I don't want to hear her get hurt. She's a 107-pound yellow lab, by the way, so she's not in any real danger, but I do everything I can to keep her safe. Anyway, I shut the door and walk around the side of my house. Now, there's an AC unit with a wall close to it on two sides, and something tells me to go check the corner, and I can't see. So, without hesitating, I trot over to the AC unit, peek over to the corner, and use my phone flashlight to see if anything was there. And honestly, what I saw kind of perplexed me at the time, but now thinking about it, it kind of gives me the chills. Illuminated under my light is an armadillo. But it's not normal. I swear to you, this armadillo had no tail. Not like it had been bitten off, like it had not fully grown. I can't fully see its head and face, which again, now looking back is kind of weird, because the angle I was looking at it, I shouldn't have been able to. I'm looking directly over it. I'm looking over this armadillo for a second because it just looks so weird. I see its eye, just one eye looking at me, and it's like it knew. That I knew something, but I just hadn't connected the dots yet. I walked inside, and no sooner than I shut the door did I connect all the dots. No tail, weird shape, a weaker small animal, no face I can see, but I can look it in the eye. Skinwalker. Now deep in my mind from Texas and living in Oklahoma. So I grab my Glock 19 and a real flashlight from the cabinet therein and run back to the corner. It's gone. Completely gone. Nowhere to be found. Keep in mind this is a 5,000 lumen Bushnell hunting flashlight specifically made for this. The thing just disappeared. Craziest thing is, 2 days later, my dad sent me a picture while I'm at work of the most beat up looking, rabid looking, tailless coyote. From what I hear, skinwalkers are smart, not immortal. If you think you have a skinwalker problem, keep protection close. You may need it. I know this sounds more like creepypasta than real life, but I swear it's all true, and I'm not too scared about it either. The only thing that really scares me is when the forest breathes, and I have proof of that. I'll save that one for another day, though. If you guys enjoyed today's stories, be sure to go ahead and leave a comment below, hit the like button, and also subscribe for more amazing scary stories.